From Florida's Space Coast, this is Your Career.
Welcome to Your Career. I'm Debbie Featherston, your host, and with me is Frank DiBello, CEO and President of Space Florida. Frank, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Debbie, and I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I am too, and I'd love if you could start off by just telling the viewers a little more about Space Florida and its role in the advancement of our space program.
Well, Space Florida is a construct of the legislature. We were created by the legislature to help grow the aerospace industry in the state and to serve as the state's agent for the development of the space industry as well. We serve two roles, really. We're an economic development support organization for aerospace growth, and then we are also the state's spaceport authority. And that's a statewide role, not just here at the Cape. So in the role of Spaceport Authority, we have a lot of special tools that go with our ability to finance infrastructure, and we apply those to aerospace growth throughout the state.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, I think the average person, when they think about the space program, you know, they often are thinking about NASA's manned space program. But there's many other aspects that make up today's space program. Would you inform us?
Well, I'd be delighted to. The space industry globally is about $340 billion, and over 75% of that is from commercial companies, not governments. I think in the last 50, 60 years, the space activity that we knew was largely federal, whether it was here in the U.S. or in Russia or China or the other nations that are conducting space research or space activity. But increasingly and inevitably, this is an industry that's become more commercial, and I expect that we'll see every few years major new applications of space technology to our everyday lives. The bulk of the industry are people who have taken space assets, satellites and other things, and are applying them in some form to benefit our life here on Earth, whether it's in remote sensing, helping us monitor the environment, or search for minerals or assisting agriculture, or whether it's in telecommunications, providing internet service globally, or images from Google Earth and programs like that. So while there is a civil agency program to explore space like NASA and a national security element to defend us using satellites and the missile programs that we've had, the majority of space activity is really commercial, benefiting everyday lives.
Tell us a little bit more about some of those commercial entities and some of the work that they're doing today.
Well, for the most part, commercial companies are taking advantage of some of the attributes of space. The biggest one is that it's high up. So when you put a satellite high up, it serves as a cell tower or as an observation platform, and allows companies to take very precise photographs of the Earth, or to monitor chemical characteristics, or look at radiated light. And these get infused into value-added information products. So while we think of space companies as being up there, the majority of them are down here taking data from space and making it valuable for our everyday use. In many ways, space is pervasive in our homes, in our cars, in our road systems, in transportation. The global positioning system is a perfect example.
Right, GPS, right?
It's helping us track and navigate precisely. The map systems that we have in our phones and in our car are an example of an application of space technology. It's cool. I mean, it really is a cool industry to work in because there are so many facets to it, and so many what I call adjacent careers. Not everybody's a rocket scientist, but we can always be related to the industry if we're taking space data or images and making it useful here on Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at the space, all the things you're describing, here we're investing, right? We've invested big dollars in space, and yet look at the benefit to how it's enhanced our individual lives.
Well, there's no question that even now, companies and countries that invest in space are doing so because by pushing to do things difficult, and the space is a harsh environment, but whenever a nation invests in space to push in advanced technologies, they're creating a culture of innovation here on Earth that really does permeate every facet of their society. That's why we're seeing today that well over 39 countries are looking to invest in space, are developing some kind of a space program activity. There are over 39 spaceports, either existing or planned, which is an indication of the number of countries that want to have an active program in space.
And I imagine that we're going to see some partnerships, as we have seen through even during the shuttle years, where there was collaboration between, what was it, Japan and several other countries, and just getting right. You pull this together, and I'll pull it. So joint effort to.
Well, I think that's one of the exciting things about the future of the space program, especially the civil space program, that which we've known as NASA's program. NASA is charged with developing the capability for the nation to explore space. And so they're focused very much on deep space exploration. And the equipment and technologies required to do that are complex and difficult to advance and expensive. And this will be done through partnership with other nations. And it actually benefits other nations to work in partnership and may contribute to collaboration in so many other areas. So it's to our well-being to be able to pursue those things.
Sounds like it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
A lot of good sense. Well, tell us from your perspective and what you're able to tell us, what does the future of the U.S. space program look like?
Well, I think that both in the last administration and certainly what I hear coming out of the present administration, there is going to be a focus on trying to drive NASA to deep space exploration and to turn over those things which we've been doing in low Earth orbit and even around the moon to commercial companies. As NASA looks to deep space exploration, Mars and beyond, they're going to have to develop the technologies in propulsion to get there faster, in life support systems to keep our astronauts alive during these very long trips. Some of the approaches to reaching Mars and beyond have involved the development of what they call a cislunar staging area. And so NASA may focus on getting to the moon and with industry partners building a platform as a staging area, something that's orbiting the moon. Commercial companies may actually go to the surface of the moon and begin to develop habitats and rovers and to even exploit the technology or the materials that are lunar-based. Bring some of those back to Earth. I know there'll be a lot of activity in low Earth orbit, close to Earth, for doing research because you can take advantage of, I mentioned the attribute of high upness, but there's also the attributes of high radiation environment or a vacuum or zero gravity. And all of these can enable new kinds of research and exploration into new materials, new technologies, medical advances.
Boy, I tell you, just hearing all of that and having read about some of this for several years, I keep thinking, gosh, if I had my career to start all over again, maybe I'd have chosen a different profession. Because some of where we're going, I think, is so fascinating.
Well, it's fascinating, and it's also very interesting to think that the people who will be going to Mars, because I expect 20 years out, or 10 years out, we'll be going to Mars in an unmanned fashion to study, to exploit, to land on Mars, and to do a lot of the prep work for manned exploration. 20 years out, I expect to see manned exploration, and that tells you that the kids that will be astronauts going to Mars are in young high school and grade school today. So it is important to catch them early. I got into the space program years ago because as a kid I was interested in how you could doodle and draw an airplane, and then how does one make something out of metal that flies from that drawing? And the whole art of aerospace engineering was fascinating to me. Space, I don't know a youngster that doesn't get turned on by space and rocket ships and
Right.
things that are truly out there.
I was going to say out of this world.
And we want to capture that interest early and trying to get them
Right.
involved in the sciences.
That's a great point. What are some of the ideas that you have about how we could better do that? I know some of the schools have had, initiatives around the STEM program, or do have programs around STEM. What can we do there?
Well, I think there's a number of things that we can do. We have to take an active role, and industry has to become an increasingly involved partner in working with our academic institutions to through robotics programs, through simulation and modeling and gaming. Kids are into gaming. We should take
Definitely.
advantage of that. There are ways to teach science at every level and get kids involved in science. Science is a process of discovery. Kids have an inquisitive mind. It's not about understanding formulas or rattling things from memory. It's about learning to solve problems, and kids love puzzles. I think we need a more active collaboration with the schools to get kids involved earlier in understanding what's going on around us and to observe things in the biological world and the chemical world and the physical world around us.
Yeah, I think you have a great point. I have a friend who is a senior design engineer, and he has been, with a concentration in radio frequency, he's been involved in radio since he was about 10 years old.
That's the time to get youngsters involved in things.
Yeah.
Just being able to communicate with other people in different parts of the world using what were ham radios years ago.
Right.
That does get your interest going. How does it all work?
Yeah, and we still have ham radios today.
We do.
Oh,
A lot of hams operating radios too.
that's right. I was going to say so, and I might be one of them. But how will this impact Florida? We're just talking about the U.S. space program. How will it impact Florida?
Well, I have always believed that Florida, and we've set some goals for Florida, both in aerospace and space, but I want Florida to be the gateway to the stars. And I know a lot of nations may aspire to that, but we have always been the embarkation point for manned flights, certainly to the moon and to the space station. But I see the Cape Canaveral Spaceport as an example. The way that I looked at London centuries ago, it was the port that opened up trade and commerce in Europe and was a gateway for all kinds of economic growth for its industry. I see Florida as the global leader in enabling space commerce. And that's what I'd like to work to position Florida to become. That's a goal that we set. We laid out a plan for not only the evolution of our space activity, but the growth of the spaceport to accommodate commercial customers to make that happen.
Now, that's fascinating, and I would be right there doing whatever I could to help you achieve that goal.
Well, you are actually through a program like this, because the foundation for whatever we aspire to in space and in aerospace is the young workforce. So anytime we can help them understand how their careers can be connected to such an interesting program is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The earlier we can help those children discover their passion, really tap that curiosity and keep them excited and inspired about space and different aspects of space. I've got a grandson that really loves robotics, and I could see him really involved in the future of the space program. So another one's is crazy about gaming, and he's creating his own game. I mean, all these are just...
And they are all great tools for solving problems. And I think one of the most interesting programs on television is Crime Scene Investigation. And there's a young female star who plays a scientist role in the laboratory. But she makes science cool.
She does.
Because she's using science to solve problems. And kids relate to that.
Yes, they do.
And they love puzzles. They love the ways to take things apart and understand how they work.
Tap into that imagination and curiosity. That's great. So, while we're still talking about the U.S. space program, I'm just kind of curious a little bit about some reports that came out a couple months ago that we were supposed to be seeing, and I think we have been seeing more launches out of Kennedy Space Center. So what do you know about that? What can you tell us?
I'm very proud of the fact that today and I'm going back 7 years because there were many people who believed that with the retirement of the shuttle, the space program in Florida was dead.
Right.
And nothing is farther from the truth. Back 7 years ago, we had just come off a period of time in which federal government was the primary enabler for space, both in the military side and in NASA's world. And with the retirement of the shuttle, there was an economic hit and a workforce hit to this area. But we set a goal to diversify the program so that today we're no longer just launching stuff. We are building the rockets that we launch. We're building satellites. We're about to build the most advanced satellite manufacturing facility right out at Exploration Park. And we're attracting all kinds of other businesses that want to be close to and provide supply chain for these major companies doing these great things. The spaceport today is committed to 33 launches this year. Elon Musk, who's the founder of SpaceX, is planning on doing close to 50 launches a year by himself.
That's fabulous.
When Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin starts to fly, he's looking at flying at least once, perhaps twice a week. Now we're up to perhaps somewhere between 100 and 200 launches. And if I add United Launch Alliance and Virgin Galactic on top of that, we should see more than one launch a week, perhaps 2 launches a week before long out of Florida. And I predict a very robust space program for Florida.
Well, that's fantastic. That's really encouraging and exciting because there's still so many people who are here that have a real passion for the space program and can help to maybe be a part of some of that workforce. And then, like you say, we got to keep building our future workforce.
It's also good for tourism and the economy.
Yes, it is.
With every launch, there are a lot of people who are excited by not only seeing the launch, but we're trying to make it more participative so that they can come to Florida and they can make it part of their trip here to not only experience the launch, but to perhaps engage in some of the learning experiences that we can create.
I think the Visitor Center does a very nice job with some of that as well, too, don't they? You know, you've mentioned some of the new players in the commercial side, which is really great to hear that we've got so much development and that the space program isn't dead, that it's just it's evolving as it's needed to. And I understand that President Trump recently signed the NASA Transition Act, and I don't have the precise name, but tell us a little bit about that and how that's going to impact the work that you do.
Well, it's I think it was $600 million over what President Obama's request for NASA was. It's a $19.1 billion budget for NASA, but it extends out over a short period of time. The bill to follow that is going to be for a much longer horizon, so I'm told, and I believe that in a few months, maybe a few weeks, we don't exactly know what the White House is planning, but they believe that space will be an integral part of the Make America Great campaign again. So they're planning a pretty big space activity, a space announcement of not only a mission for NASA that gives them a focus on Mars and beyond, and I stress the and beyond, but also talks about partnership with industry and partnership with other nations. And so I think you'll see a lot of lunar activity that may be commercially supported. This is lunar base. You'll see exploitation missions to the surface of Mars. I think that in the next 10 years, you'll see a number of trips to Mars that are unmanned, and in 20 years, a number of manned trips. And in the meantime, we'll be developing a lot of the technologies required to do that. And this is very exciting for me and for everyone.
Absolutely. And one thing that you said that really got my attention was the fact that perhaps in this next budget, it'll be for a longer period of time, because I think that's been one of the biggest problems that the space program's had, is that the budget is always dependent on each administration coming in, and I don't know how long they're looking at, but I would love to see a window of 10 years or something that goes way beyond an administration in terms of funding. So instead of stopping and starting and stopping and starting some of these programs, I mean, it seems like we've invested lots and lots of money, and then new administration comes in and pulls the plug.
I don't see a change in the way that Congress authorizes and appropriates, But I think that the planning that supports
Okay.
the authorization process
Okay.
will clearly be much longer range, and that is what the administration is hoping to
Good.
accomplish.
Good. Well, thank you for that clarification, because I was getting all excited that maybe.
Well, listen, I would be excited too to see us finally doing business in a sane way.
That's right. I just think, when you think about it as an industry, and looking at the foundational work that it does, that the U.S. space program does, it makes sense to give it a longer tenure.
It needs consistency and
Yes.
certainty with respect to what the budget
Yes.
plan is, and that's what I'm hoping they can
Yeah.
begin to tackle.
Absolutely. So when we talk about, let's go back and talk a little bit more about some of well, let me ask you a question that's kind of been percolating in the back of my mind. When there was a lot of work that I'm sure Space Florida went through when there was with the retirement of the shuttle, right? And so there was this shift from more government to more commercial. How has that influenced what you've done and the role that Space Florida has today? I'm sure there were some challenges that you experienced in that transition.
There really were. The first challenge, and the major one, was that with the retirement of the shuttle, we lost some 9,135 jobs in the area. And that has an impact on schools, on families, on the secondary businesses that support the industry. And I realized that about a third of the workforce was going to retire because they had stayed with the program.
Yeah.
So part of the challenge was to fill in with some new companies that could take up a lot of the workforce before we lost them to other states. And we've largely been successful in bringing in fairly quickly a sufficient new company base to keep a lot of that workforce and to bring in a lot of new hires as well. In the more recent years, we've broadened the industry. So our goal was to broaden the space industry beyond just launch and to deepen the supply chain.
Yeah.
Because the supply chain is filled with local companies that are making materials and parts and supplying the people that are actually building the spacecraft that we fly. And that's had a big impact on the area because we are now growing a broad-based supply chain in the state. For the past several years, Florida was #1 in aerospace attractiveness. So it's been our goal to keep it there and to actually have the state over a 10-year period become the #1 aerospace state in the country.
Yeah, yeah. We have about 5 minutes left, and you've answered a lot of questions that were on my mind about, manned flight and timeline for all of that. What do you see as the future for the state of Florida? You were talking about the goals that you have, but is there anything you can tell us a little bit more in terms of your vision for Florida or the impact on Florida as it relates to space?
We're going to be focused, Debbie, on trying to build, and I'll use the word ecosystem, for aerospace in Florida. And that includes everything from building on the work that the legislature and the governor have done to create a business regulatory and permitting environment that's very friendly to aerospace, to the tax environment, both at state level and local community level, to the academic and educational foundation that produces the workforce, the quality of life, and the communities, which are at the heart of supplying that workforce and keeping it going. But we want to address the entire ecosystem, a key part of which is the transportation, roads, bridges, rail, and all the other things, including the port and spaceport that support the growth of the industry. So as we look at planning all of those out, we want to anticipate an environment where at the spaceport alone we're doing somewhere between 150 and 200 launches a year. That there's different kinds of activity with people going up into space from Florida and doing research or perhaps even 10 years out and going on vacation destinations up there. There certainly will be companies like Virgin Galactic operating, we hope, out of Florida. There's not a commitment yet to do that, but there'll be multiple companies flying passengers to space as part of a Florida vacation or a Florida adventure. And so I see a lot of that kind of activity. The biggest area, though, I think, is as we continue to put more and more satellites up into space, and those satellites are interconnected with airplanes flying. At any point in time, we have 7,000 airplanes over the U.S. and 14,000 worldwide, all carrying sensors connected with things on the ground in our pockets. They're all producing a huge amount of data, and there are going to be thousands of companies that are starting up, helping us create algorithms and apps to make use of decisions that help our everyday lives. And I want to see a lot of those companies here in Florida. Yeah, I think I have the coolest job in the state, but
I'd say you do.
but my real passion is in getting young people excited about science, excited about space. And space by itself does get their interest, but we need to figure out how to get them active and involved, whether it's through a robotics program or a gaming initiative or creating aerospace and space academies in our schools.
Boy, that would be
getting them
great.
playing space games, something that helps them along a career path that is good for the country overall. They don't have to work in space because they can work in medicine or work in all kinds of areas that apply that technology to our
all
everyday
contributes
life.
to that.
Yes.
Well, Frank, thank you so much for being my guest. And on behalf of my guest and everyone here on the set of Your Career, thank you for watching, and remember, be career happy.
More information about this program is available online at millermediagroup.org.